What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the podcast. Perhaps this is episode 8. I'm so excited that we're here. I've been thinking ever since I recorded episode 7 that I've recorded enough episodes now that you can listen to one every day of a week. And that is huge for me. And it may seem like not that big of a deal, but it's huge for me because when I started this podcast, I was struggling to put myself out there, to be creative in general, and to battle my perfectionism and just put stuff out there in the world, show up how I am, and just contribute. You know what I mean? And so now we're 7 weeks in. We haven't missed a week. Now 8 weeks in. Haven't missed a week. And so thank you all for coming along on this journey. You've been here since the very beginning. That's what you could say when we reach episode 100. We're getting there. We're getting there, okay? I have a lot in store. I have a lot planned. I have a lot that I'm excited about. So today we're going to talk about something that's a bit more personal. Last week we talked all about the Rizzler, which was a great episode, by the way. If you skipped that episode because you thought that you wouldn't understand any of it because you didn't know who the Rizzler is, hey, trust me, I did y'all a solid and I explained everything pretty well, I think. And we got really deep too. It wasn't just a meme episode. We got real. We talked about politics. We talked about the ethics of filming your children and posting them online and the legalities around it, new policies that people are instituting to protect children who are child influencers, which is such a wild term. Anyway, go check that out. It was a great episode. But this week, we're talking about when they notice that you change before you do. Who can relate? I hope you're already thinking about how this relates. I hope your gears are already turning. What I'm talking about is we all want to change something in our lives, and we're all trying to change constantly, trying to change our habits, trying to change our lifestyle, trying to change the outcomes of our lifestyle, trying to change our relationships, our careers, trying to learn more, grow. And it can be so frustrating sometimes when it feels like we're not making any progress. And even the idea of needing to make progress can sometimes just be such a hindrance to making any progress because it can be so overwhelming and so easily lead to guilt and shame and feelings of inadequacy. I get it. Trust me, I get it. But when you do change, and I mean like a big change that you had been looking for, typically it doesn't happen in a moment. It doesn't happen as smoothly as you would hope it would. And oftentimes it's other people who notice the change before you even do. Or if you are a bit more intuitive, you're able to stop and think about what the differences in your life in the present moment and realize, oh, I have changed. I'm not sure when, but sometime back, I definitely changed. How I am right now is definitely different than I was a year ago or 2 years ago, 3 years ago, or even a few months ago. It's not a quick moment of change. It's not like getting bitten by a spider and then you wake up and you got muscles and you don't need glasses anymore like Spider-Man. No. That's not how it works. So I want to get a lot more deeper on this subject. But the reason I think it's so important is because, like I said, that feeling of needing to progress can be such a hindrance and lead to so much stress. But also, I want y'all to have more grace with yourselves and to have more grace with others as we're all constantly changing. And so we're going to talk about, how to have more grace with yourself, what it means to change in a way that your friends notice before you do. Also, how we're able to see this process in our thinking as well, and our thinking about religion, politics, all this stuff that really matters. And then we're going to close it off by talking about how this relates to the prophetic. Such a deep, heavy word, such a loaded word. I get it. But trust me, you're going to want to see the way we connect things, okay? This is what I love doing. Connecting a bunch of things, which I did a whole bunch of on the last Rizzler episode, by the way. I just had to plug that one real quick. But how to plug it again. I'm going to keep plugging that for the rest of these episodes. I'm going to, that was the peak, perhaps. That might have been the peak. No, we're going to keep going. We're going to keep growing, keep learning. So something happened this week that made me want to talk about this. I went to an event to hear this author I like speak, and it was with a spiritual community church thing, a group. It's one of those groups that sometimes aren't sure what to call themselves, but basically like a church. And I used to go all the time, but it's quite a drive from me, and a lot of things in my life shifted, and so I stopped going about a little over a year ago. And I went to this event and saw a lot of people I hadn't seen in a little over a year. And this older woman who I used to see all the time came up to me and we were talking for a bit, just for a bit. And she was able to notice something in me. And she paused and looked at me and said, "You seem like you're doing great. You look great. And you just seem a lot more peaceful. A lot more peaceful, a lot more calm. You look great." And that was interesting and surprising for me to hear. And first off, the first initial thoughts that emerge from hearing something like that is a bit of defensiveness. Because if I were to say anything, if I were to respond in any other way besides denying what she said, then I'm opening myself up to a vulnerable moment. Because if I say something like, "Thank you," or "Oh, that's good to hear," then I'm confirming that I was less peaceful before. I have issues with vulnerability sometimes, people. That's just how it goes. I've gotten a lot better throughout my life, but that's just something I deal with. And so that's why that's one of the first thoughts that, I mean, I'm saying like in a millisecond, boom, thought before I even could say anything in response. And then of course the next thoughts come in of like, respond, be cool. And then realizing that's actually great to hear. Yeah. I think I am a bit more peaceful. I think I am doing great. So yeah, I thanked her. I said, "Oh yeah, that's awesome to hear." And then just a couple days later, I was talking with a friend who lives in LA, and we text and we'll talk on the phone sometimes, and we're sending voice messages back and forth through text and just like updating what's been going on. And she was telling me some stuff she's been doing lately, and I was just responding to what I think about some of the stuff she's been doing, and also said just a little bit of what's going on in my day. And I hadn't talked to her in a couple months. And she responded by saying, "You sound like you're doing great. You sound a lot more peaceful and a lot more grounded." And again, that thought immediately emerged of, what do you mean I'm more peaceful now? I've always been like this. Like, I think that's what my initial reptilian brain that only knows anger and fear wants to respond with, of like, I always talk like this. I've always been like this. What do you mean? That part of myself that is scared to be seen, is scared to be fully known because of what people may think. But ultimately, I was glad to hear it. Like, you go further along and the brain stems. I'm not even sure if that's really how it works. I think that's how neurologists used to explain it. It's like the reptilian brain, I don't remember the other ones, but there's like another brain layer, and then like the human brain is like, it's like this layered brain of further developments, and you get to the human brain, you get consciousness and stuff. I don't know if that's real, but that's at least the metaphor I'm using here. Thinking a bit more on it, I'm able to realize, oh yeah, that's awesome to hear. And I think I am a bit more peaceful. Interesting. And I'm actually going to talk a bit more about this peace stuff and how I found some of that peace in another episode that will just be for the Patreon. I've said in a few past episodes that I want to start doing at least a monthly bonus episode for the Patreon because, I mean, there's a lot of reasons. But I think the big one is I really value my Patreon community. And for years, I've not known what to give the people on the Patreon, like bonus videos or bonus updates or bonus essays. I don't know. In the past, I used to do a bunch of bonus videos and then I got burned out. And so I realized like, oh, this could be a cool thing to do. Let's do some extra podcast episodes because I like doing these. And I think y'all will enjoy those bonus episodes too. We'll get a bit more deeper and more personal over there. Okay. We'll save the super personal stuff for the bonus episode. So go check out the Patreon if you want to hear more about my journey of finding this peace. But what I will say, the last time I did post something on Patreon, I think it was the last time. I may be misremembering, but if I did post something else, it would have just been like one other post or something. The last time I posted was the beginning of 2023. Where I just wanted to give some sort of life update because I hadn't posted in general a lot because I was, pretty burnt out after I had published my book, The God Who Riots, in August 2022. But I was thinking about the direction I wanted my life to go, and I realized I need peace. And so I made this little video for the Patreon just saying, my word for this year, 2023, is peace. I need to find some peace. I was experiencing a lot of depression and anxiety and lack of focus, lack of creativity and inspiration, motivation. And I needed to develop some areas in my life, some internal and personal everyday areas of my life so that I could feel like a more whole person, so I can keep making stuff and doing the things I want to do and hanging out with the people I want to hang out with and working on the things I want to work on. It was a short little video. I think only like 2 people watched it, which is cool. And then I just disappeared. Like I felt bad, but I also thought it was kind of funny. Like I'm going to go look for peace and then I don't post for 2 years. I'm just gone. But it's like, did this journey go wrong somehow? Or did he find peace and just decided that he doesn't need to come back to this Patreon page anymore? Or he doesn't need to come back to the internet anymore? I wondered what people thought. But with that in mind, it was even more interesting to hear these 2 people tell me, yeah, you seem a lot more peaceful. I don't think I've ever heard someone actually compliment me in that way. You seem a lot more peaceful. And as I was thinking more about it, it got me thinking, yeah, that's how change works. And we don't know ourselves as well as we think we do. Like so many of us get on these journeys of, I need to find myself, or I need to find my true self. I need to find who I really am underneath all the things that people say about me, or all the things that I wish I was, all the things I could have been, all the things I think I should be, my influences, my relationships. Who am I underneath all of that? Where's the true self? And honestly, I'm not so sure there's anything on the end of that journey. I mean, there's a much deeper conversation to be had here about the nature of this self. Is there a permanent, unchanging self underneath all the things we attach to the self? Is there a shared self that all humans are a part of? Is the self an illusion? This is a debate that people have been having mostly within religious settings for thousands of years. And I think it is interesting. I'm not going to get too deep on it. I actually do get pretty deep on it in the book I'm working on right now, though. But that book's not going to come out for a very long time. So, but I bring that up to say, like, just think about it. If there even is a self at the end of that, a true self, I don't think we can actually know it as well as we think we could. I mean, this is why we have doctors and therapists. We experience, like, let's start with doctors. We experience some sort of difference in our body, maybe like some sort of pain somewhere in the body, and we don't know what the hell it is. If we were capable of fully knowing ourselves, then I don't think there would be confusion ever about things happening in the body. We would just know it. But no, that's not how it works. We feel some sort of difference in the body and we try to guess what's going on. And there's many times where we can't figure it out. And so we go to the doctor and say, "Doc, I've been feeling this pain." Or, "Doc, I can't sleep." "Doc, I'm I'm trying not to get too graphic. Something's bleeding." I was going to say, "I'm spitting blood. My teeth, there's something going on with my teeth. There's some growth on me." I don't know. There's something going on and I can't figure it out. Help me. And then the doctor has to basically, like, the doctor doesn't know either. I was going to say guess, but it's definitely a more educated guess than we can do in that situation. But they have to ask questions. They have to do tests. They have to do a bunch of things to try to figure it out. And there's also, we have therapists. It's like, I'm really sad every day I wake up and I have no idea why. What's going on? Or I keep randomly getting overly angry in these few situations. I have no idea why. I need to talk to someone about this. And then you talk to a therapist, or you simply talk to a friend who knows you well. And knows you well. And as you talk it through, you're able to make a more educated guess. What's going on inside me? What's the difference? It's like, usually any change we experience, our mind has to catch up to try to understand it. And often we just guess. Yeah, I think I'm feeling bad because this and that happened, and haven't been getting that much sleep. I haven't been eating the way I usually eat. I'm not as close with some of the people I used to be as close with. That must be it. Or yeah, I have been feeling better. I have been eating a bit better. I've been moving around a bit more. I've been stretching. I've been hanging out with my loved ones a bit more. That must be it. That must be why I'm feeling better. We're just guessing. And like I said, some guesses could be more informed and educated than other guesses, but it's still a guess. This is how change works. And this is why there's times where other people can notice the change before you do. I mean, you even see it in like basic emotions. Like, have you ever been in a situation where you just have a nasty face on? You just got an attitude and you think you're cool. You think things are chill, but your friend sees, nah, their face is different. Like, I think they're annoyed, or I think they're sad. or I think they're thinking of something else. And sometimes you know it too, and then someone else notices it. But there's also many times where you don't even notice it yet, and your friend calls it out, and you're like, oh, I didn't even realize I was making that face. Or, oh, I didn't even realize I was feeling that way until you suggested that I was. Have you ever had an experience like that? Or have you ever had an experience the other way around, where you notice someone else has changed and there's some sort of difference in their face, some sort of difference in their voice and their presence, and you suggest it to them, and they're like, oh, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, you're right. I didn't even realize. I think in the same way that you're able to pay attention to someone else and notice a difference, I think that level of guessing is the same level of guessing that we do to ourselves. Like, it's not like we are capable of knowing ourselves like that much more than other people. It's like we just have more experience of noticing things within us. But I don't think we have a stronger capability of noticing things, differences in us than other people. We just have more experience doing it. And then if you have someone in your life that you're with all the time throughout several years, I'm sure you've experienced that this person often seems like they know you better than you know yourselves. You know? And of course, I say all this to try to give you an idea of how futile it can be to try to reach the end of this journey of really knowing yourself, of really understanding yourself. That's important work to do to get to know yourself more than you did before. But there isn't an end point to that where you finally can fully understand everything about yourself. And one of the reasons also, besides just lacking that ability, is the fact that we're constantly changing, period. There's all these ways that we wish we can change, but then there's the fact that we're always just changing. We're in a constant state of becoming, and there's no end point to that becoming either. And so this noticing, this paying attention is how we notice change. And typically when we notice it, we're just catching up. And we realize, oh yeah, I have changed at some point before this. I don't know when, but some around that time. And yeah, there is a change. And you also see this with like when you try to change your habits. Sometimes we like want to feel better, live better, like be a bit more healthier in some way, physically, mentally, emotionally. And so we start changing our habits or start new practices in our lives. And then we could get quickly discouraged because we don't notice any difference after a few times. Or some of you out there only tried one time and then gave up after that one time. Like, this doesn't work. Like meditation, I think, is a great example for this. Meditation is something I've had experience with. I mean, I think the first time I tried it, I think I was 20. I'm 32 now. I just turned 32, by the way, a couple days ago. Pisces season. Shout out. And yeah, it's been a while. And there's been seasons where I've been off and on with it. But meditation, when you first try it, it's very difficult. And you don't really notice any difference. Sometimes you do, sure, but not a huge difference. And then you do it again the next day, and it's still hard. You don't notice that big of a difference. And then you do it again. It starts to get easier, but still don't notice that big of a difference. And then you do it again, and then again, and then again. And it's one of those things where it's like, it's a few weeks later or a few months later where, again, you're able to look back and realize, whoa, I'm actually getting angry a little bit less. It's actually a bit easier for me to focus on some things. It's actually easier to respond more consciously to people. It's actually, I'm actually getting a little bit more peaceful. But again, it's not this quick Spider-Man moment where you change. That's not how change works. It's something that you notice later and catch up with later. And this happens also with things we're learning as well. As we're shifting beliefs, the more we learn and grow in our principles and values and beliefs and ideologies and political views and theological views. We're all constantly learning. And sometimes we come across this specific idea that we just connect so heavily with that we just embrace it and try to learn as much as we possibly can. Like you learn about, let me think, Marxism, Leninism, Maoism. And you're like, this is it. I need to learn as much as I can. Or you learn about anarcho-syndicalism. These are all somewhat obscure political tendencies that some of you may not be aware of, but there's some legit stuff in there. And if you're open, and or you're like, I'm gonna be a Zen Buddhist, not a regular Buddhist, but or not just a Buddhist, but specifically the Zen Buddhist tradition that comes out of Japan after they adopted it from the Chinese Chan Buddhism and the ways that it was specifically taught by this school of teachers within the Zen tradition. You get what I'm saying. When you find this like specific idea that you become obsessed with and you go all in. And then what often happens once you begin that journey is, I like this phrase or this term, the cage stage. Now I'm not sure if this term is used anywhere else besides Calvinist conversations, but that's where I first heard it. Long time. By the way, yeah, for those who know, Calvinist is like just a specific Christian theological position based on the ideas of John Calvin, but more so based on the future students of John Calvin who emphasize a lot of specific doctrines as more important than others. It doesn't matter. We don't need to go into it, but they can be extremely zealous. That's what you need to know. And my friend sent me this documentary several years ago about Calvinism and people getting turned on to Calvinism. And by the way, I'm not into Calvinism, by the way. I just wanted to make that clear for the people who don't know what it is. And then they go search it and think Damon's a Calvinist. Nah. Anyway, the friend who sent it to me was actually going through a phase of his life where he was becoming Calvinist and he became extremely zealous about it. And he sent me this documentary and there was this part of it where they're talking about these young men who become Calvinists and they become so zealous about it that they can't shut up about it. First of all, they become kind of annoying because they're constantly trying to evangelize to the people around them. And they even start guilt tripping people and get aggressive and basically give everyone a reason to not want to be a Calvinist because they're trying to force people into it. It's like they have this huge shift, this huge revelation, and they want everyone else to think like them. Everyone else needs to have this huge revelation that just changed my whole life. So, and if you don't, then you're ignorant or you're evil or you hate me. Or you hate the truth. You just hate the truth. You just prefer lies over the truth. This is the truth. Why don't you agree with me yet? And so they call this stage the cage stage. I don't remember exactly what they said about it, but it was something like when you're just so zealous and aggressive about it that you need to be put in a cage to like calm you down. It's kind of a wild ass metaphor, but every now and then I think of that term with so many other ideas, beliefs, ideologies that people get into. There is that cage stage. There's that weird, overly zealous stage where they're just way too annoying about it. I just want everyone to know, hey, just so you know, I'm a Marxist-Leninist Maoist now. Hey, just so you know, as an anarcho-syndicalist, this is the truth. Hey, by the way, it's, as a Zen Buddhist, I need you to know that this is how I view these things. Hey, did you know I'm a Zen Buddhist? Yeah, I just wanted you to know that I'm a Zen Buddhist, so I disagree with some of the ways that you're living. I need you to know, as a Maoist, I have an issue with some of the ways that you're living your life and some of your political theories, and we can't be friends anymore. You know what I mean? You've all seen this type of stage, and I'm sure some of you or all of you may have experienced a stage like this in other areas. Now I bring this up. Let's connect this back here to say that as that stage slowly starts to fade away, sometimes it's just a quick phase. Like my friend who sent me that documentary, who was having a little bit of his own cage stage, he realized he wasn't thinking straight pretty quickly. Like I think only like a couple months later, and then he slowly started to fade away from those ideas and looks back on it in embarrassment of that little stage that he was in for that season. And so sometimes it just fades away and it's just a phase and you move on. Other times it becomes more embodied, more solidified within you. It's not so much of an obsession that you're fanning over, that you're standing over, but more like an honest conviction. And when it's an honest conviction, that need to prove to everyone that you've changed your views, or that need to convert everyone, also starts to dissipate. It melts away. And I really think a big reason for that early overly zealous phase is because as you're trying to convince, the real reason you're trying to convince other people of this new mind change, the real reason is because you're trying to convince yourself. And if you could get people around you to believe the same thing you do, then it gets a little bit easier to believe it yourself. But if it's just something you know, it's just a conviction you have, it's just a principle, it's just a value, then that need to convince other people goes away because you're already convinced. It's like, this is just what I believe. And yeah, I'm down to talk about it with people, but I don't need to be all weird about it. And I think of like in these political views, I think we see this a lot with like different leftist tendencies, like socialists, anarchists, communists, or even progressives. When they have this type of shift, they there's a difference. Think of the leftists in your life. There's a clear difference. The people you know are leftists because they're always telling you, and the people who you know are leftists because you can just tell by the way they act, by the way they talk, by the life they live, by the things they do. You just know. They don't need to tell you. Or think of the men who are feminists. I'm sure some of you have come across men who announce themselves as feminists. And then there are the men who you just know are feminists and they don't need to say it. Like, personally, yeah, I'm a feminist, but I don't But it would be weird, I think, to go around telling people that. Instead, I hope you see that in the way that I talk about women, the way that I treat women, the way that I critique patriarchy and cis heteronormativity, even without using those words. But the way that I live, the way that I talk, the things that I do, the way I respond, I hope you would realize I have those values without me needing to say it. Because we all know people who say it, and then you look at how they live and talk and act and respond, and it's like, yeah, you're full of shit. Yeah. And I think it's like there's kind of that trope of the annoying male feminist in culture. And I think that's a big part of it, is like, it's not really male feminists in general. It's the men who feel the constant need to tell others that they're a feminist. I think that's the thing people are annoyed by, and it has to do with this: noticing changes within people and how sometimes it's more authentic than other times. And when it's authentic, other people can notice without you saying anything. Just like in these situations where you're feeling some sort of different emotion or different practice, different habits, and people notice it without you saying anything, even before you notice it. This is how change actually works. And again, when you live from a place of an awareness that, I mean, I have things I'm learning, I have the ways I'm trying to grow, things I'm trying to do more of, things I'm trying to do less of, and I'm just always changing. I think that's a much healthier place than looking at it linearly. Like, I'm going to become this and I need to become this. I just can't wait until I become this. Then I'll be worthy. Then I'll be happy with myself. Give up that thinking and embrace the thinking that it's like, no, I'm just always changing. And at some point I'll change and then I'll catch up. This is just how it works. I had a friend today that I was hanging out with who, and he's a really cool guy, and we think similarly on a lot of things, but we hadn't seen each other in a really long time, and he's this older man who, like, is familiar a bit. Like, we've had conversations about like my specific theological and political views, but we hadn't talked about like everything. And he also doesn't like watch any of my videos or read any of my stuff. I mean, he just happens not to. But in the middle of the conversation, we just shifted to talking about Palestine and Zionism. And he was really talking about the problems of Zionism that he sees in a lot of churches. And I thought it was interesting when we shifted to that moment, because part of his point that he was making was, it's not just conservatives that are Zionists and that are uncritically supporting Israel's genocide against Palestinians, but it's also like many progressives he sees are either in support of Zionism or just are completely silent about it. And what I thought was interesting was when he started talking about that, I could tell that he assumed that I was pro-Palestine and anti-Zionism, which was a risk, because, like I said, his point was that the people you'd think would think like this, not even them. Like, we can't, and it's like, and this is an example of the type of change or the type of noticing that happens when something is more authentic. He just could assume that based on other ways I talked about other things. And he rightly assumed that I'm pro-Palestine and don't mess with Zionism. But it was just an interesting thing to notice that he was able to rightly assume that based on knowing other things about me. He was able to rightly guess that based on other things he knows about me. And yeah, I just think that's such an interesting thing of the way that we are able to notice things in other people without them saying it. And the ways that we're able to notice change in other people without them saying it. Which brings me to prophecy. And so this conversation that I had with this friend today shifted to talking about hearing from God and the prophetic and the validity of some of these stories of people claiming to have these prophetic words from God. Like if you don't know what that means, prophetic comes from the Bible. And I mean, originally in the Hebrew Bible, the ancient Israelite prophets would be these people who get a word from God, a message from God, and go to the community and say, this is what God is saying. And oftentimes it was a critique of injustice going on in the community and telling them God is not pleased with this. Or sometimes it would be, this is what God plans on doing for you if you live righteously, or and then this what will happen if you don't live righteously, if you continue the injustices in your community. That was usually the theme of a lot of these prophecies by these prophets throughout the Bible. And the Christian tradition adopted that idea of prophecy from Judaism. And today, you have a lot of modern evangelical Christians who talk about the prophetic kind of similarly to the way people talk about fortune tellers. Like, I'm going to pray to God for a person, which by the way is also pretty dang different than biblical prophecy. Prophecies are usually meant for communities, not individuals. But there's a lot of ways that evangelicals have, and American Christians in general, have individualized everything in the Bible. That's another conversation. But anyway, how some of these modern Christians do it is, I'm going to pray to God for a message for you, my guy, and then say, God is telling you that your life is going to turn around, that you're in a tough spot right now, you're in a transition, but God has a plan for you and he's going to protect you. Or sometimes it'll get more specific than that. God is telling me that you're going to find a wife, that your wife is soon to come. Or God is telling me that you need to stop watching porn, which is wild. It's like, God is just telling me. And or God is telling me that you need to turn away from your sinful life. Or God is telling me that you're called to be a pastor. Or God is telling me that you're called to be a missionary to this country. And this is the message from God. Now, I'm sure, as you can assume, this type of prophecy could get really toxic and really manipulative. And so when we were talking about prophecy, we started by talking about some of those like phony, manipulative versions of the prophetic and how much of a problem it can be. And I talked about how I never really got that. But then we talked deeper about it, and we're saying, well, I do believe that everyone has equal access to God, and everyone can hear from God, but not necessarily in like a literal message with words, but rather there's a lure. There's something that emerges and provokes us to pay attention. And some people are just paying attention more than others. I don't think some people are able to live a more righteous life than others and gain more access to God than other people. I strongly reject that. My conviction is that everyone has equal access to God, but some people just pay a little bit more attention. And I was saying, like, I've had those experiences where I can sense there's something calling me here. There's something luring me to respond in a different way and to move beyond myself. And then he was telling me some of his stories where he felt like there's a pretty strong sign that there is something deeper going on with the prophetic. And he told me a couple stories where someone was able to tell him a prophetic word and they had no idea anything about him. They're complete strangers, but they were like right on to what he was going through in life. And then he told this other story about himself getting this dream or this vision and this message from God. And he told this other group of people about it, and they're shocked. And they're really shocked. I mean, they're from another country, and he felt like God was telling them something about them. And he said, I love the way he worded it. He said that they were surprised, like this was something they knew already, but no one was paying attention. Or he said that they're surprised I was just paying attention to something that the world was ignoring. And that like really struck me. And then I started thinking, like, I think that's what the prophetic is. Paying attention to what the world is ignoring. I don't think it's like just being extra holy, extra righteous, extra prayerful, and getting this exclusive message straight from the clouds and downloaded into your mind, and you go give this clear message to somebody. I don't know. I don't want to be too certain in the other direction, you know? But what I do believe is that, yeah, the prophetic at its core is paying attention to what the world is ignoring, or simply paying attention to what the other people in the room are ignoring, which is why it makes sense how some of these prophetic words are simply like, hey, God is telling me you're going through something. Like, you can often sense that by just looking in someone's eyes, that they're going through something, looking at their mannerisms, at their behavior, the way that they look around. You can tell there's a difference. I think they're going through something. You're simply paying attention to what the rest of the room is ignoring. And perhaps that is a divine communication as well. Perhaps it's both of those things. But whether it is literally a divine communication or not, it is paying attention to what other people ignore. That's why this podcast is called Perhaps, so we could go there, you know? And so I encourage all of you, pay more attention. Pay attention to your own life, the ways that you have changed, the ways that you are constantly changing. Pay attention to the direction that you feel like you're moving in, and consider whether or not you want to continue in that direction. Consider and pay attention to what the people around you are going through and the differences that you sense in them. Pay more attention. Because when you do, you'll notice change before other people do. And you'll notice things that everyone else is ignoring. Thank you for listening. I'll see y'all next week. Go listen to that Patreon episode. I'm about to record that right now, actually. Peace.